Proverbs are the palm oil with which words are eaten. If you appreciate anything at all about African folklore, you probably know this statement. It appears in the novel Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, who is from the Igbo of southeastern Nigeria and one of the African continent's most celebrated writers. What I love about this statement is how it succinctly but brilliantly describes just how important proverbs are to the conversational arts of African people, just as palm oil, an essential cooking ingredient, is across West Africa and other parts of the continent. Proverbs, these nutrient-rich word pellets, they've sustained community life across the continent and the world, probably from as far back as when humans learned to use language, and they summarize, often in metaphorical, witty, and rhythmic fashion, the morals, wisdom, truths, or traditional views of a group, and store and transfer ideas from generation to generation. This is why recently I found myself curious about what philosophies, morals, wisdom, truths, proverbs of African people have preserved about the natural world. There is a reason for this. And the reason really is that I sense in myself sometimes, but also among my fellow Africans, a bit of a disconnect from the natural world. So sure, on some level, we understand and appreciate Mother Nature and have some notion of natural cycles and the role we play in it. But this appreciation can be a bit superficial, immersed as we are in our fast-paced world of technology and its discontents. And I am speaking primarily here from the perspective of those of us Africans who live in more urban parts of the world, either on the continent or elsewhere. I imagine people who live in rural parts of the continent are not feeling this as acutely as we are. But even when that awareness is there, sometimes it can be more of an awareness of the natural world as a resource to be protected from exploitation or funneled into development. So it's not exactly an awareness of the mosaic of biological reality that nature really is, with its own kind of sentience and, dare I say it, ideas for its own evolution or suggestions for ours. So in this episode, we'll look at proverbs from across the African continent and explore what they teach us about the natural world in particular and life in general. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Mythological Africans podcast, where we read and talk about stories from African mythology and folklore. I am your host, Helen Nde. Let's start with a small experiment. If you're in a safe and comfortable place, I want you to close your eyes for a second and take a couple of deep breaths in and out, allowing yourself to feel the sensation of breathing and being here and now. Then, if you can, find a memory of a time when you experienced some aspect of the natural world that really made an impression on you. It could be anything, a rainbow, the first time you saw the sea or the ocean or a mountain, the memory of standing in a forest and hearing the sounds of insects and animals or wind rustling in the leaves, the last time you looked at a sunset, the first time you tasted water from a spring, the smell of a fruit you have never smelled before, seen before, the first time you saw a newly born animal, anything. Just think about it and hold that memory for as long as you can. One of the most perplexing realities of being human is just how much we as a species have separated ourselves from the rest of the organisms and life forms we share the planet with. And for far too many of us, the natural world is a backdrop to the intoxicating drama of our lives, right? In a modern internet parlance, the natural world might as well be an NPC, right? That's a non-playing character that's just there to fill up space and mindlessly, repeatedly perform activities which would then stand in contrast to our deliberate and prolific actions. Just picture the sea waves crashing in the background while a reality show star runs along a beach breaking down over his girlfriend's cheating. Or that holiday spot where you must stop to take a picture because if you didn't take that picture, did you even go? If you don't have the picture to prove it. For others, the natural world is a necessary burden to be tolerated. The bitter snowstorm that gets in the way of our holiday plans, or the merciless monsoon rain which floods our homes and communities, or the oppressive dry season heat that just sucks the will to live from the very essence of our beings. To others, the natural world is an enemy to be outsmarted and conquered with predictive algorithms and highly adapted gear. And many others just don't even see the natural world anymore, right? Virtual reality is way more interesting. And yet others, and I include myself in this category, are hanging on for dear life to what is left of our nature consciousness, constantly looking for ways to remember the connection. My own first experience of consciously witnessing the natural world occurs when I was quite young. And this was after a thunderstorm in Bamenda, the Cameroonian town where I was born. And this was one of those big, violent storms with blinding flashes of lightning and bone-rattling thunder. And it raged all afternoon. I think it was a Sunday afternoon. It raged all afternoon. And in its wake, a hush settled over the town. Traffic became a muted hum in the background, and people seemed to walk around carefully and speak quietly as if they were afraid to draw the attention of whichever angry spirit had just passed through. And I don't remember where we were going that Sunday evening, but I remember being in the back of my parents' car and looking out the window and noticing that the waterfalls, if you're familiar at all with Bamenda, it's a hilly town. There are hills surrounding the town. And there are two visible waterfalls that come down those hills. And I noticed that there was a difference in the volume and color of the water coming out of one of those waterfalls. Usually this waterfall was a serene streak of white just sliding down the dark green cliff. But after the storm, it was a furious, frothing, reddish brown mass just jutting at an almost 90 degrees from the cliff wall. It was terrifying, honestly. And I watched it for a long time, just mesmerized by the change and wondering what it would sound like to be close to it. And I think I really decided that I don't like thunderstorms at all if they make waterfalls so angry. I still don't care for thunderstorms, to be honest, but if I was from the Nupe of Nigeria, I might have been comforted by this proverb. When it thunders, the child is glad. The Nupe are found in north-central Nigeria, and like most African people, agriculture was and remains a major economic activity in which the whole family participates. And in such a context, a thunderstorm, even if frightful, means two things: relief from the need to be outside for strenuous work, and free, abundant water, a precious resource in this semi-arid zone. But I was a child who saw things quite simply. If it disturbed the peace and order of my world, it wasn't much to be enjoyed. And of course, I see things differently now as an adult, right? Sometimes what is chaotic and frightful might just be what is needed to shake, a new paradigm free from the clutches of an oppressive order. And even more, it can come with an abundance of gifts, or as the Yoruba, also Nigeria, say, a day's rain makes up for many days' drought. Change can be difficult, however, so the ability to seek and navigate change calmly is essential. But for many people on the African continent, change is all too often preceded or proceeded by war. And as we speak, there are at least 35 armed conflicts going on the African continent, making it the second most conflict-prone place in the world after the Middle East. And I'm pretty sure the African continent would be number one, except the website I looked at to get this classification grouped the Middle East and North Africa as one entity and the rest of the African continent as another. So perhaps if we looked at the African continent as the landmass, we might just end up at the top of this list. Now, if one used cancer to describe the different troubles that could afflict the human race, war would be the deadliest kind of cancer, in my opinion, metastatic and terminal. Perhaps this is why when a war starts, the Xhosa of South Africa say, the land is dead. These four innocuous words perfectly capture in my opinion anyway, the wasteful futility and just the masochistic folly of any war, no matter how justified it may seem to be. Nobody truly ever wins in a war because water, not blood, is what enriches the land. But how to live in a way that prevents war to begin with? This is an age-old question for which African proverbs have an abundance of nature-derived wisdom to offer, and these proverbs use the natural world's capacity for symbiotic and reciprocal relationships, unity in numbers, and other pro-social qualities to show how a people and the land might be kept alive. Consider this proverb from the Mongo of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The bonenge tree which saved you from starvation in time of famine, when clearing your garden, do not fell it. Simply put, one good turn deserves another. But think about the ecological implications of building our cities and towns with a consciousness of and respect for the natural world. The Ashanti of Ghana say, one tree receiving all the wind breaks. Simply put, there is strength in unity. But again, think of the ecological implications. Wangari Maathai would be most pleased. The Nandi of Kenya say, a grass fire is stopped by a river. Or simply put, the right solution will fix a problem. But the Amazi of Northern Africa warn, wait for the river to be calm before you try to cross it, which advises caution with any decision. One of the main things which distinguishes traditional societies of the past from societies of the present is that societies of the past had this keen awareness of the natural world because they needed to for survival. Modern science and its capacity to analyze and predict and even manipulate nature has dramatically changed this dynamic across the continent. But as the specter of climate change on one hand and evolving or devolving human relationships, on the other hand, are demonstrating, we must maintain a healthy awareness of and respect for nature, her cycles, and her lessons if we are to survive as a species. Thank you as always for listening, and I'll see you next week.